And we're recording something.
We're recording this.
Ever heard that Adam Sandler skit?
Yes.
Hold on, I'm recording something.
Welcome to Podcast PD. It is Sunday, November 15th, 2015. Podcasts are the great anytime, anywhere way to learn, laugh, think, and grow. We are talking about the power of podcasts and podcasting for professional and personal development for educators. We answer your questions and collaborate on how podcasts can make a positive impact in your life and your classroom. Tonight we are joined by myself, Chris Nesi, Stacy Lindis, and AJ Bianco. Let's get to it.
Hey, everyone.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight.
We're glad you're here.
So glad we're here.
The shadow was killing me over here. She was making faces while Chris is doing his intro.
I saw you trying to stifle your giggles.
So real quick, as we get started, Stacy, where can people connect with you? Introduce yourself.
Okay, I am Stacy Lindis. I am a tech coach at a 4-5 Google Apps for Education school, GAFE. I call it GAFE. AJ does not agree with me. And but I also used to teach first grade, and I know how word patterns work and spelling patterns. So the E at the end makes it a long A, AJ. Just saying. And I can be found on Twitter at iRunTech. And I'm wearing my running shirt today. That's where the run comes from. I don't really run anything besides my house.
You ran a race recently, though, which we could... Oh, you did that last week. That's old.
I recapped that last week. We're done with that. Moving on.
AJ.
I thought if you make a mistake, it's not pronounced GAFE. It's pronounced GAF. Isn't it spelled the same way? Like, come on now. That's why.
Okay.
That's why.
So, are you saying that with Google Apps for Education, so it's a GAF?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Alrighty then.
Doesn't that make them homonyms or homophones? Or
I have no idea. I'm not.
They're homonyms. Homophones sound the same, and homonyms look the same. Bow and bow.
Oh, got it. Cool. And both work very nicely. Where's your friends? Hi, everybody. AJ Bianco. You can find me on the Twitterverse at AJ Bianco. Former social studies teacher, currently professional development coordinator for a district here in Bergen County, New Jersey. And yeah, I'm kind of just going with it, watching some football, talking to you people, and enjoying our podcast chats. So let's bring it. Let's go.
And I'm Chris Nesi, Mr. Nesi on Twitter, and I host the podcast House of Ed Tech over on chrisnesi.com. So, what are we talking about today? Oh, we got people introducing themselves in the chat too.
Oh, more
Mark?
Jersey people in the house.
Yeah, I see that. Mark's from New Jersey. Mark, what part of New Jersey are you from?
I think Mercer.
Mercer County. Hey, fellow neighbor.
Social studies. There we go. Social studies.
Indiana.
History in the house.
We love history.
Craig Yen, jack of all trades, teaching 4th grade. Hey,
I'm sure. I know.
We master it all.
So on the agenda today, I had put down something to get the ball rolling, which would be how to start podcasting with our students. Where do we begin? What can we focus on? And some tips and advice, whether it's hardware or some software, or how you can get that off the ground. Now, Stacy, you're in the process, I think, still of working on the grant, and which you received can you give us an update as to where you are with that? Because that's your goal this year, is to be podcasting with students.
Yeah, so I am technically 15 days late of my goal of getting things up and running on the 31st. And Craig is supposed to hold me accountable, and we actually chatted about that last week. But I'm in a holding pattern now because I need to make sure I come in at or under budget. And right now the equipment is more expensive than the grant money I put in for. So I know it sounds ridiculous, but in that process, I'm doing some research. I'm looking for collaborators and working on, getting ideas for what this could look like. So I'm currently researching podcasts that already exist that come from schools. So with Joe Sanfilippo and his students, I'm not sure that I want to replicate that exactly, but there are so many good things happening in my school that I really want to kind of figure out how I'm either going to brand that or take advantage of that. But as far as equipment, I'm on a holding pattern until the prices come down.
We got a question coming in from the chat from Craig, and he wanted to know how much your grant was for.
I believe, Mr. Yan, that my grant was for, was it 450, Chris? Can you help me write that?
I had nothing to do with the amount. I just made the gear recommendations for you.
That
Maybe it
is
was like
true.
500. I don't know.
I think it was 450, 550. It definitely had a 50 in it.
But it was a good amount of money to basically in the end create 2 mobile podcasting labs for your school.
Yes, and so the idea would be that there would be 3 mics and 1 mixer and 2 sets of those. So in essence, 6 mics, 2 mixers.
Now, since you've had lots of time you wanted to put the grant in for this, what are some of the things that you want to help the teachers you work with and the kids that you work with podcast about? Because that's a big question that comes up in podcasting is, what do we talk about? So what would you have?
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that's my step 1 is, and I think that depending on who I work with, it will look different for everyone. And, if I work with one class and one teacher to begin with, it could be whatever their slant is, whatever their focus is. And then if it's school-based, then I'd do more work with the principal and the vice principal to kind of get a sense of where they want to take it. So the options are endless. It's just a matter of narrowing the focus. Because I don't want it to be some jumbly mess of just, whatever. Unless that is the focus. Do you know what I mean? Like, unless it's the focus. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Craig makes a good point. Work with the world.
I start with the willing.
There you go. Because once you produce your content, you have the ability to let anybody hear it. You may not start that way. That's where you can grow your audience too.
Right. And, my intended audience is the faculty and staff, but also the parents of the students in my building.
Now we have a bunch of people here in the chat. So if you have questions about podcasting for yourself, or you want to share your experience with listening to podcasts and how you're learning from podcasts, by all means, we have the open seat. You're more than welcome to join us here on the chat. And again, if you have questions that you just want to ask and you don't want to maybe come on camera, you can do /Q and then your question, and then it'll come up for us and we'll be able to address that. AJ, what's going on in your world with podcasting, with technology? What's good?
With podcasting, I'm trying to listen at times. As usual, I don't get enough listening in, but I was listening to your show yesterday, Chris, in the House of Ed Tech, as I was blowing some leaves off of my front lawn. As my usual podcasting, it's usually when I'm doing some yard work. So thank you for the musical interlude during your episode.
I'm glad I'm a part of your routine.
It helps me get through some annoying yard work.
Now, I'll be selfish. What did you think of Postmodern Jukebox?
Okay, so I did enjoy it. I just don't enjoy like today's music, so I didn't really know many of those songs. I tell you guys, I don't listen to that kind of stuff. I don't know. It's right. If they did a little more country, I'd be happy.
Okay.
I enjoy my country radio, and I enjoy music from the 90s. I'm not down with today's, I don't know even what it's called.
Today's Top 40?
I don't know. It's annoying.
Adult contemporary?
Oh, good God, no.
That's not adult contemporary.
Like Michael Bolton.
That's like, oh, Michael Bolton. If the Shadow comes back, maybe she can drop a Michael Bolton lyric or two, because her mom used to listen to that all the time.
Barf.
But in the world of podcasting, I actually tried to use GarageBand with some teachers at the school I'm at to get them to podcast their students. Once the Italian teacher was trying to have her students record, I guess kind of like a Sports Center promo about a sporting event that was going on. And I told her the best way to record it would be creating a little podcast where you can have some music in there or some highlights. So she gave it a try, and I'm waiting for the final results, as I'd love to hear what the students came up with. But yeah, so the GarageBand was what I've been using for that. I don't have the other tools available at the moment.
All right, now we're going to try. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say there are lots of free tools. Oh my gosh, Twisted Wave is one of them that I'm definitely going to explore. Mm-hmm. And then Audio Boom is something that I downloaded onto my my phone, and I'll get onto the iPads that we have at school just to kind of test the waters and see what it's like. And I really like what Chris says every week at the end of Blab, how it records everything. And now I'm just thinking logistics wise, how I would have 3 kids in one room. I guess that's what the mixer would be for. Wait, Chris is my.
I'm not familiar with Audio Boom.
No, I'm not very familiar with it either. Just because it lives on my phone doesn't mean it does much besides that.
Got it.
It's a good mobile app for recording and capturing audio, which you can then easily, export and put into something like GarageBand or another audio editor. Or I believe you can also use Audio Boom to produce from start to finish your audio content.
I think so, because I think, and Connie, I don't know if she's still participating, but she can correct me if I'm wrong. I think that's what she and Joe Sanfilippo did when they were at what good educators do differently, which is where they met. So, AJ, Craig Yan has a question for you. He wants to know what the score is.
0-0.
Okay, so it's still no score. And then Brian would like to know what the ideal length for podcast is if you're sharing it with your staff.
Got to keep it simple. Got to keep it interesting. Yeah. I mean, some people don't like anything more than 20 minutes.
I'm going to default to. I don't think something can be too long. It can only be too boring. So, if you're doing it with, again, anybody, whether it's kids listening or you're using something for professional development, if it's engaging content and you find it valuable, you could listen for an hour and a half, or if it's real quick and it's, 10 minutes, but it's got a lot of, meat and potatoes and it's valuable content, it could be 10 to 15 minutes. I don't think time is a factor.
I agree with you, but also you got to keep in mind the audience. If we're letting teachers listen, we're going to have, they might be listening during a prep period or on their lunch, and they may not want to stop and go in the middle of content. That's the only reason why I said 20 minutes, 30 minutes even, sometimes. I agree, Chris, if things are good and things are rolling, please put it on your car, but it depends on the person. If you want to catch them.
Yep, I agree with all of those points. It depends on the content. If the content's boring, I'm turning you off no matter how long you are. But I prefer shorter ones just because I can finish an entire podcast episode in the span of a drive to school, and my commute is about 30 minutes.
Well, and the plus is you do have the ability to stop and listen, and you can, we use the phrase in our presentations, anytime, anywhere, so you can stop at your leisure.
I agree with you. And I think going back to Brian's question, he's talking about, and I get it, we're all learners, we're all teachers, and that's really our focus audience in this conversation. But think about the teachers with whom you work on a daily basis. They're not necessarily always putting in this type of time after school or in their cars, so I would say start short, build your audience, and then maybe expand. But I wouldn't go too much past where you start, only because I think that once you go off in a different direction, you might lose your original audience, your core audience.
Right.
Well, let me ask you this real quick, and then we'll get to Chris Harris's question. If you were going to recommend a podcast to somebody who is not yet consuming podcasts, would you recommend a podcast that is education-based, or more like what I'll say is guilty pleasure? Would you recommend like a really good podcast? Well, not that education podcasts aren't good, but like, would you default to like Serial or something,
It depends on the teacher.
Yeah, right. I don't mean to cut you off, Stace, but even think about Jamie. Jamie is not into podcasts. She's not into any of that stuff. I tried to get her to listen to Serial. She wasn't feeling it. I try to throw her some educational ones that would be good for her. She's just not into it. It didn't grab her. So it kind of depends on the person and what their interests are and where they want to go with it. But like, you have to have that interest. So Jamie likes to read, so maybe podcasts aren't her thing. I can't sit still, so podcasts are my thing.
Does Jamie listen to audiobooks?
No.
Okay. And see, for me, that was my entry point into podcast listening. Like, I started listening to audiobooks because that was also content that I could consume anytime, anywhere, and still feel like I was taking part in something that was not just, watching television or, taking a nap. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, who watches television, honestly? I mean, it's kind of hard. Who just sits here and watches television?
Sits there, yeah.
Especially on the Sunday with football on.
All right, let's
television.
Let's address Mr. Harris' question.
I know. I'm sorry.
I was say, any recommendations for Mac screencasting software? Screencasting on a Mac.
Yes.
Which I guess would be good for video podcasting if you want to create some video tutorials.
Yes.
Right.
Screencast-O-Matic, Screencastify, anything that you can get through a Google extension, I'd recommend. I'm looking now at what I used most recently.
Also on that would be web-based, but also on a Mac by default, you can screencast with QuickTime.
Yeah. Not a big fan.
I mean,
I haven't got a hang of it, so that's why I didn't recommend that.
But you can record your screen. You can also connect if you have iPad, iPhone. You can actually use QuickTime with the device connected. You could screencast the tutorial off your iPhone or your iPad. Right.
I think I used Screencastify, and I had some pretty good success with that. And then I won Camtasia. Well, actually, one of my colleagues won the Mac version of Camtasia, and she's not a Mac user, so she gave it to me. So I won Camtasia by TeachMeet New Jersey, and I have to play with that because I hear that that's like...
You won it last year. The year before, I won the Windows version. That's how I have a copy of it.
Well, I won it this summer. So,
right.
Yeah.
I couldn't get a hang of that one. They installed it on my computer last year at school, and I'm going
to have to check it out. I'm really intrigued because I do hear that it's the best.
Tough.
That's what Adam's using on the show and casts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So he's doing a good job there.
And Craig Yan just said, yay to Camtasia.
Hey, I'm just looking through the feed over here, guys, and a little while ago, Brian said he had 2 students blab for a unit assessment. I'm kind of curious if Brian would talk about that. I don't know if Brian wants to jump into this empty seat over here.
I don't see it. Yeah. Yeah. So Brian, come on in. And then while we're waiting for Brian to decide if he's going to join us, Craig Yan wants to know if there are any listening tools to speed up a podcast 1.5 to 2 times. Yes, there are. Yep. I just use the
Yes. Next question.
No, I use the native podcast app on my iPhone, and I generally speed everything up to 1.5 times. However, Chris turned me on to Overcast, and that gives you a few more options besides 1.5. And 2 times is just ridiculous. I can't listen to any podcast on 2 times. It's just like squirrels chattering, chipmunks. But I do like Overcast, so that's been pretty nifty.
I do too with their, they call it smart speed.
Mm-hmm.
So you could bump it up to 1.5 times, and then it'll go a little faster than that and cuts out, blank space and silence.
Yep. And there is Brian. Welcome
To
Brian.
the podcast, Brian.
Hello, how are you
Brian's
guys?
a Blackhawks fan.
Okay, how are you?
Doing good.
Very good.
So AJ.
Yeah, no, Brian, thank you for jumping in. Sorry, I was kind of focused on something else. Brian, I was just looking through the feed and I saw you had used Blab as an assessment. So could you tell us a little bit about that and what you did, how you did it, how you graded it?
I've used twice with 2 different things. One for a unit assessment on voting philosophy. I had 2 young ladies who set an appointment at 7:30. I set up a Blab and we discussed their voting philosophy for 18-minute show. And so obviously they did really well, had some prepared comments, opening comments and closing comments that I told them to have prepared. And I was able to ask them some questions and challenge them on their thoughts, and they enjoyed it. They thought it was a little awkward being in a video conference with a teacher. I think they're used to FaceTime with their friends, not with their teacher. But once that went away, it really flowed, and they did a very nice job.
Now, Brian, one
Very
of the
cool.
concerns for using Blab in education, as an example, is the fact that it is something that's public. It's being broadcast live. Were there any issues you encountered in that situation with, people coming in and checking it out or making comments?
Yeah, and I prepared the young ladies ahead of time, and I was monitoring off to the side as a teacher. Those are my students, and I'm very guarded with who comes in and who comments, and I talked to them about that. They were both on phones, so they didn't see the chat room there, and I X'd out a couple things, and that will concern me from using this format more until I get a handle on that. I do realize I can go up to the top and I can have people step out or block them or whatever. So I really I want to make sure I have a handle on that before I do this a lot more. The second Blab I did was a sports club. I call it Delphi Bracketology. Students and teachers just talk sports. And we tried to put together the NCAA bracket in the spring, and we had a conversation about college football. Didn't have any of those issues. So no one popped in. Also prepared the students for that. It's a great format. I do concern about that public viewing, but I addressed that with my students ahead of time. And I still am maybe looking for a different format where I can have a more private conversation if we're going to use it with our students.
What's the user agreement? What's the age limit?
Well, since Blab is connected to your Twitter account, if you have a Twitter account if you have a Twitter account, you can be in Blab. Now, whether or not you have that Twitter account appropriately,
What's the age restriction on Twitter? Because for a while there, I didn't even think there was one. I only ask because this has been a huge discussion in my school district as of late. And it's before I recommend anything to anyone at this point, I'm looking things up and checking, because once I recommend it, it came from me and I can't do anything to take it back. Do you know what I mean? So I do all of my checking on my end. And when teachers ask, I check for them, but I also show them how to check.
Stacy, after a quick search, Twitter doesn't ask for your age when you sign up.
Yep. That's what I thought.
Yeah.
That just makes me nervous because, the other thing is, mind you, I teach 4th and 5th grade students, or that those are the students with whom I work. But I had a 5th grader follow me on Twitter, which I thought was kind of bizarre. I've never had that before. And then discovered that he was also tweeting out in the middle of class. So that was something that I needed to address with his teacher. You know, hey, this kid's like tweeting out pictures of his classmates, you know, and whether or not their parents have signed media releases. It's been a bit of a headache. So I like that you're taking that risk, Brian.
It's and I have it was my honors students, and they're juniors and seniors. So I'm willing to do that. I would not be willing to, you know, necessarily maybe do that if I was in 7th or 8th grade teacher. And like I said, I still am guarded with the blab, but I tried that out and I liked it, and we videotaped it and we showed it to other classes, and we've done some things and our students are speaking better. The Delphi Bracketology Club has made some podcasts. First time we went to a live video conference, you can see the growth in the young men in speaking. So I like the idea. I do need to be aware of those other issues though.
Yeah, Craig just took a direct quote. Our services are not directed to persons under 13. If you become aware that your child has provided us with personal information without your consent, please contact us at, and then they give you an email address. But I'm imagining that if you have honor students, that they are all 13 and older.
Brian, real quick, you had mentioned if you could find something that was more private, you could check out appear.in, which will let you video conference with up to 8 people.
Okay.
How about a Google Hangout on
yes,
air?
And the reason I did this at 7:30 is a lot of these things are blocked at school. Blab is blocked. Google Hangouts are blocked. We're getting ready for what we call e-learning days for snow delays. We're getting ready to practice one. And yet our students, we have that issue of all of this video conferencing technology being blocked. But students can access that at night, at home. That's why we scheduled the time at 7:30. So I did think about Google Hangouts, and I will think about this other as well. And I appreciate your time and asking me to join.
Thanks for
I'm
joining
sign out
us.
All right, Brian, thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Take care. And Chris, you said that was appear.in? Okay,
It's the same site I've been promoting with you guys. In our Google chat for the Ed Justice League. I actually conducted...
You know, the thing we tried 2 weeks ago?
I actually conducted my interview with Danny via appear.in. And then I accidentally blocked her.
Did you?
I have to work on that.
Nice.
Because I set up one. I set up one for the Ed Justice League, and I set up one for House of Ed Tech, because on appear.in you can claim a URL that you can then take ownership of the room and continuously use the room.
Oh, cool.
And it has, again, you can do the video conferencing, you can do screen sharing, and it also has text chat as well. It's pretty cool. We'll have to play with it at Camp New Jersey, which is only a week away.
Yes. A week away. So I know you want to talk about that, but I see Connie back in here. Connie, do you want to join us? We were talking about different ways to capture audio for podcasting, and I know that with Joe Sanfilippo, you explored Audio Boom. We had some questions.
And thank you, Craig, for sharing.
I
think you thanked him, Stacey, but thank you again, Craig, for sharing the Twitter age stuff.
Yeah, thank you. That's awesome.
Now, for people that don't know, we do release this blab and some podcast PD as a podcast, which you can find over on Spreaker, Spreaker. And we also post all the archives for our chat, which will include links to the replays of this blab and other blabs over on edupodcastnetwork.com. That's always fun. The Education Podcast Network.
Yep.
Podcast for educators, podcast by educators.
Podcast.
For more great content, go to edupodcastnetwork.com.
Awesome.
And there's the king of the link. Thank you, Craig.
I was going to say, Craig Gans on top of it. So you mentioned our big excitement for next weekend. Do you want to go into more detail about that, Chris? AJ?
Chris, go ahead.
No, I'm just excited that next Saturday is Ed Camp New Jersey, the 4th annual Ed Camp New Jersey. New location. Hopefully some new people, but we got some some great
I'm not excited about the new location.
because it's further
I'm
away
not
for
gonna
you.
lie.
It's further away for me, but it's still going to be a fun day.
It's
Be a
like,
great day.
how close is it to New York?
How close is it to New York? It's not close to New York.
It's not close at all.
Whatever.
It is not close.
I'm going to be in the
It's out
car
of
for
my
over an
way.
hour. New Jersey's not big enough for me to be in the car for over an hour.
And I'm going to be in the car for about an hour.
AJ, you bringing a kickball?
Yeah. Come on now. Kickball's happening.
I'm bringing my kids.
You are
Bringing
again?
your kids.
I am.
Where is Connie?
They can't play kickball.
Where's Connie from?
What's that?
Connie, where are you from?
Connie's from New York. New York.
She said we wish we weren't so far away. Get in the car and come. Let's go.
She's not from New York City. She was like upstate, I think.
I think she's close to the Rochester.
She just said you're complaining about traveling an hour to New York or to Ed Camp.
Oh, real quick, Douglas Clement at Douglas Clement on Twitter just recommended Boss Jock Studio, which is a tool that I use. It's an iOS app for your iPhone or your iPad that puts a sound mixing board on your device where you can load up audio clips and you can produce a podcast episode using something like Boss Jock Studio because it will record and play little audio clips that you want to insert throughout. So it's really cool. It is $9.99, but it's a solid investment. And I'm saying that because I did put up the $10.
No, I'll have to consider it. We'll see. We'll see if school will pay for it.
There you go.
Connie just said she travels 3 hours to get to Ed Camps. No.
Well, that's like some people who get on planes and they fly around the country from Ed Camp to Ed Camp, like Ed Camp hobos.
Those people are awesome.
I want their job, and I would love to have the money to just jet set around the country to free Ed Camps.
Craig said that Ed Camp, New Jersey is only 45 hours away. He's getting in the car now.
You know, we'll probably see him on Saturday.
That would be so cool. And then he could participate in Sat Chat in our time zone.
But then he'd still be in all the other ones too, which is totally cool.
That is true.
All right, since it's 10 after 9, should we do our podcast recommendations?
Before we do that, are we presenting at Ed Camp about anything podcast related?
We can. I'm actually,
I was just wondering.
I'll announce it here live that I'm actually going to be recording the episode of House of Ed Tech that I'll release next Sunday. I'm going to record the content on Saturday in some form. So it won't be live, but I want to talk to people. Yeah, but on location. Normally I record it here where you see me right now. I'm going to take the show on the road.
Cool. Just make sure it sounds good. I don't like when people take their show on the road and that sounds like crap.
Please. The king of not
Have you met Chris?
met me?
Come on.
standards. Standards.
So this is cool though. So I'm really excited about Ed Camp just because this will be the first time we've been together since when?
Like Philadelphia.
Ed Camp Philly?
June? Oh no, no.
No, something happened before that.
No, it was leader, Ed Camp leader.
Ed Camp Leader.
Leader.
And this is actually my first Ed Camp New Jersey, even though I've been organizing it for the last 3 years. There are no babies on the way for me. So I'm my first one I get to go to.
Are you sure Jamie's not going to pop one out between now and Saturday? No, we're good.
I hope
I think
not.
this is my third Ed Camp New Jersey. I missed the first one. I didn't know about Ed Camp until after the first one.
Me too.
Yes.
So our podcast recommendations, Chris?
Sure. This episode's podcast recommendations are brought to you by the Education Podcast Network. Podcast for educators, podcast by educators. For more great education podcasts, in addition to what we're going to talk about now, you can visit edupodcastnetwork.com. Stacy, looking at the show notes, you're up first.
Yay. Lucky me. So going back to one of the questions that we had earlier, what's your preference for podcast length? I do like the shorter ones. a little bit better. I will stick with my longer ones that I started with way early on, but generally the ones that I listen to now are shorter. And the one I'm going to recommend this week comes from Gretchen Schultek, who comes at you from, I have to look at my show notes. Sorry. She's blogs at Always a Lesson. And then her podcast is called Always a Lesson, Empowering Educators Podcast. And what I like about her podcast is that it caters to the various levels of teachers. So she talks each week to a different of teachers, new teachers, more experienced teachers, and then coaches, which I think is really the more interesting one for me. And then she has like a general week. So each of the 4 weeks of the month is a different slant. And she's 16 episodes in. It could be my podcast catcher, but it doesn't. I don't seem to have any new content since the 28th of, I think, September. But maybe I'm wrong on that, and I don't have my phone near me.
I think she's got one. I think she actually has one out in the last couple of weeks, so could be a catcher issue.
Could be a catcher issue. I know I'm a minimum of 6 episodes behind.
Oh, okay.
But I discovered her over the summer, and I've loved every single episode I've listened to.
And that's okay. I mean, because you're never really behind, but you always have something to listen to. So that's cool. You can binge it. You can.
Absolutely. That's my favorite thing about podcasts is binge listening.
I'm gonna go next, and I'm gonna recommend 2. One is a guilty pleasure that I just got turned on to this week, and that's Gotham Undercover, which is from Golden Spiral Media. And this is a weekly fan podcast about the TV show on Fox, Gotham. You can find it at goldenspiralmedia.com/Gotham. The show is also on Twitter, and they are at Gotham GSM for Golden Spiral Media. And they have a whole bunch of really good podcasts. I also listen to their Flash podcast and their Arrow podcast. So if you enjoy those programs, you might enjoy those TV show fan podcasts. And their network has some great content overall, but Gotham Undercover. And the second one, which I think is really relevant for both of you and even myself, because I really suck at this, blogging, writing and creating content. So the other podcast that I want to recommend is the Pro Blogger podcast. And that's created by Darren Rouse, who's from Australia. And the Pro Blogger podcast is designed to help you build a better blog. You can find that podcast at problogger.com/podcast. And Darren is on Twitter at ProBlogger. And his podcasts are less than 20 minutes. And he goes through a lot of the content he puts on his blog about how to create blog content. And it's just all these tips about writing and creating better blog posts and growing your blog audience. So if you're not up for creating podcast content, but you want to build your blog, this is definitely a podcast you should listen to, Pro Blogger.
And Chris is always getting people out there to create. That's his big, this is call to action. Create, create, create.
Just hit record, baby.
Pusher.
AJ?
I wish I had some new recommendations for you guys, but I'm just going to go with an oldie but a goodie. And Kelly Croy is back with some great content with the Wired Educator podcast. So for the passionate tech people out there, I am enjoying listening to him. I wish I had something new, but I listen to what I've got. And when I tell you that I have a lot of unplayed episodes, I won't tell you an exact number because Stacey gets mad at me.
No, I'm right up there with you. I started listening to audiobooks and I'm like 50 some episodes behind at a minimum.
50.
At a minimum, but then my podcast catcher also stopped downloading them because I was not
making a difference. Connie just said that she has subscribed to and is downloading all the episodes for Gretchen's podcast.
Connie, you will love her. And then please Vox me and let me know what you think. I think you will really, really enjoy her. I think you and I are always sharing the same wavelength. So I think you will really like her.
And then
it is
Fox Stacey. Good. Make sure you rate and review that podcast and let Gretchen know how much you enjoy her show.
Yeah. And then I also would like to chime in with AJ's recommendation because I love The Wired Educator with Kelly Croy.
Stacey, you're the one who turned me onto that program.
I really like that one. I also like that he's an Apple Distinguished Educator, and since up until last year we were a Mac school, it kind of helped me out with a lot of the stuff that we were doing, especially K5 in my district where we were pretty Apple centric, but we're moving towards Chrome in the 4.5s. So
Nice. I'm actually going to try something real quick.
I'm looking it up on my device.
Okay, before we get out of here tonight, Stacy, you want to talk about rating and reviewing podcast episodes since Connie is now subscribed to a new show. So let's go.
I'm looking for the procedures. Could you help me out there?
The procedure for what? Rating and reviewing?
Yes. Like, how do you do it? I know I've done it before, and it's in the podcast app, right?
Yes. If you pull up a show that you are subscribed to, you want to find that show in the store, not where you're subscribed to it in the Apple podcast catcher, for example. And once you find the show in the store, you'll have the option to write a review and rate it.
Connie, when I find my phone, I'll box you the directions. So she wants to know not in the podcast app. I thought it was in the podcast app.
If you're not in the podcast app, that means you're going to do it directly through iTunes.
But it is through the podcast app.
I'm saying if you're not on your phone and you're on your computer, you'll do it through iTunes.
All right. Yeah, I'll side box you, or I'll box you if you can't figure it out.
Nice. All right.
What are you laughing at?
Nothing. I'm watching TV. Jimmy put a show on. It's funny.
You're fired.
I'm fired.
You're
I was
fired.
listening to you, rating and reviewing through iTunes. You can do that.
Yes. Yes. So just like I'm looking at it now. So just like in when you search for an app, it says details, reviews, and related. When you click on reviews, you can then review it. It says write a review, and then you have to put in your credentials, and you're good. I've only rated and reviewed 2 podcasts before.
Is mine one of them?
Yes, and I got, I think, a shout out for that. Very
that's
early
right.
on. And then another one, the other one is the original podcast that I started listening to, the running one.
All right, so we'll close out this and then we can stay on Blab a few minutes. But thanks for checking out Podcast PD. Thank you to everybody who participated in tonight's conversation. We love your enthusiasm. We love your questions. We love when you participate. That's what makes the chat and the conversation go round. Stacy, where can we find you?
I can be found on Twitter at iRunTech, or you can look for a new blog post, which I have to publish by tomorrow, according to Jen Williams. And my blog is iruntech.me. AJ?
I'm sorry, I didn't know you were done. You can catch me on Twitter at AJ Bianco, or I actually do have a blog post in the works as well, so you can catch me at my blog, ajbianco.me. I don't talk much, so sorry about that, everybody.
That's cool.
That's what happens when you watch a football game all night.
I'm not watching a football game right now.
Liar.
Jamie put on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and it's funny.
The show's still on the air.
I'm totally off base right now.
Anyway, I'm Chris Nesi. You can find me on Twitter at Mr. Nesi, and I am the creator of the House of EdTech podcast on chrisnesi.com. You can get the replay of this blab and this podcast over on edupodcastnetwork.com and follow the hashtag podcastpd. Good night, everybody.
Thanks for
Good night,
coming.
everybody.